children, this is Dimple from Dimple's Joy of Storytelling, and I've come with a new story today named Cat Burglar. Janie James can play the piano, and this is how she came to learn. It's about a small girl who loved playing piano, but because she was poor, she couldn't take a proper tutor for it. But finally, she managed to do it, and let's see how. Mr. Benson lived in that flat above Janie's. He was a music teacher, and sometimes Janie could hear people playing the piano when she went past. "Can I learn to play the piano, Mum?" asked Janie. "We can't afford it," Mrs. James told her, because they were poor, and piano lessons are really expensive. Janie would have liked to go to Mr. Benson's flat and watch him playing, but Mr. Benson never asked her in. Janie's cat, Lucy, also liked the music, and she would sit outside Mr. Benson's door. "It's no good, Lucy," said Janie. "He won't ask us in." But one day, Mr. Benson came to see Janie's mother. "I'm going away for a week," he said. "Would you mind going up to my flat to water my plants while I'm away?" So Mr. Benson was going to travel, and he wanted a favor from Mrs. James. He wanted her to water his plants in his absence. "Oh, I'll be happy to," said Mrs. James. She was a very kind lady, and you should always be helpful to your neighbors. Janie smiled. Now she would be able to see Mr. Benson's piano. So while Mr. Benson was away, Mrs. James went to water his plants, and Janie went with her. The piano was in the living room, and Janie tried to play it. "Don't do that," said Mrs. James. "We are here to water Mr. Benson's plants, not to play his piano." "Where is Lucy?" said Janie when they were outside the flat. "I thought she was with you," said Mrs. James. "She must still be in there," said Janie. They looked all over the flat, but they couldn't find Lucy, the cat. "She must be in the garden," said Mrs. James. "Never mind. Lucy will come back later. Let's go." So now but Lucy was in the flat. Look in the cupboard. Children, if any of you have a cat as a pet, you'll notice cats love to go in cozy baskets, go and hide in the cupboards, under the bed in a very cozy corner. They like this space. They like that coziness. So in the same way, Lucy also loved it, and she went and slept in the cupboard. She had got into a cupboard with a warm water pipe at the back. She curled up, and soon she was fast asleep. The time went by. At last, Lucy woke up. She came out of the cupboard and went to the door of the flat. But, of course, it was shut. So Lucy went and found a big chair and curled up in that. She was not bothered. She said, "All right, probably next day I'll get to go out. It's just a house." So she slept on the chair. Janie was worried when Lucy didn't come home. When she went to bed, she just couldn't sleep. She was too worried about her Lucy. She was still not asleep when Mrs. James went to bed. "Has Lucy come home?" asked Janie. "No," said Mrs. James. "But don't look so worried, Janie. Lucy can always get through the cat flap. Now go to sleep." Cat flap is a small area which people have in their houses for their cats to enter and exit. So they don't have to go and open the door, and the animal is familiar with it. There is no disturbance to any of them. But Janie just couldn't sleep. She waited to hear the noise of the cat flap to tell her that Lucy had returned. Janie wasn't the only one who wasn't sleeping. There was also a burglar who was getting into Mr. Benson's flat. Oh no, what's going to happen? He had watched the flat and guessed that the man who lived there was away. He climbed up the tree to the window and broke in. The burglar turned his torch on. He was in the bedroom. There was a television on a small table next to the bed. "I'll have that," he said with a smile to himself. But just then he heard something. "Music?" he cried. "Who's making that noise? There's no one else here. This place must be having ghosts," he thought. He dropped his torch and it broke and went out. Then there was more music. "Help!" shouted the burglar, and he ran into the next room. He fell over something and hit his head on a table and knocked himself out. Means he became unconscious. Jeannie sat up in bed. She was sure she had heard a noise. What was it? Music? It is coming from Mr. Benson's flat. She cried, "Mom!" Before they went up to Mr. Benson's flat, Jamie's mum did the right thing. She called the police. When the police came, they soon found out who was making music. Can you guess who was making music? It was Lucy. "Oh dear," Mrs. James said to the policeman. "We called you out for nothing." The policeman was looking behind one of Mr. Jameson's big chair. "No, you didn't." He looked at Janie and smiled. "I think you and your cat have helped to catch a burglar." That was clever. There he was, knocked out behind the sofa. Look. When Mr. Benson came back, Janie's mum told him about Lucy and the burglar. "She made a terrible noise," said Janie. Mr. Benson laughed heartily. "Perhaps Lucy should learn to play the piano." "It's Janie who wants to learn to play, Mr. Benson," said Mrs. James. "Is it now?" said Mr. Benson with a smile. "Well then, I had better be her teacher." "But we can't afford," began Mum. "Never mind that," said Mr. Benson. And that's how Janie came to learn to play the piano. And that too really well. I hope you enjoyed the story, children. Always be brave, but don't do something careless. Always inform a grown-up or a police if you see something like this, because to act on your own could be dangerous. And Janie did the right thing. She told Mom and she called the police, and hence the burglar was caught. I'll see you with a new story next week. Till then, bye and take care. Try to read the story along with me. I deliberately try and do it slow so you can read it along with me. Take care. Bye-bye.